Hello, Braingist fans. We have been talking about sleep for a lot of time now, and some time now, I would say, probably not a lot of time. So let's move a little bit away from sleep and do something different today, and that is the subject of headaches. I enjoy talking about headaches, and not just for the sake of it, but headaches are pretty common. I believe probably I would say up to 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 7 people would suffer frequent headaches. For women, it's 1 in 5 or thereabout, and for men, slightly less frequent. So it's an affliction that's commoner amongst women. So let's talk about it a little bit more today and move away from sleep. I've dedicated quite so many of my previous videos to sleep. Yeah, so we do headache today. And what exactly about headache are we talking about? Yeah, in some of the previous videos, I've talked about why you would need to have a head MRI scan. You know, there are a lot of people who don't know they're supposed to have head scans, and probably they just gone on treating their headaches, buying over-the-counter painkillers. I believe there is a huge treatment gap when it comes to regular headache sufferers. I believe not up to half of people who suffer regular headaches make it to the doctors to get a diagnosis of what's causing their headaches. And that's why I think it's important to make this video, and I think it could also help clinicians, interestingly. Because there was a young man who walked into my clinic very recently, I think 2 weeks ago. And this guy has had headaches for God knows how many years, probably about 10 years, if I'm correct. And he's now in his mid-30s. And he's lived in the UK for most of his life. I guess he was even born in the UK. And interestingly, he's been following doctors in the UK. And then he visited my clinic here in Dubai for the first time, probably 2 weeks ago, and he told me he's got cluster headache. For those of you who've been following my videos, you would understand by now that there are different types of headaches and different causes of headaches. So this individual was diagnosed with a type of headache that we call cluster headache. And then he came for treatment or continuity of treatment. Now, if you don't know what cluster headache is, you can check some of my videos. Just look at the catalog of videos I've made in the past, and you'll certainly see something. I've done something on cluster headache before. So, one thing about cluster headache is that it's an intermittent disorder. It's not like migraine, where, at least for the most part, it's not like migraine where people continue to get headaches, be it once a week or twice a week, or on a rather frequent basis. So there's never a time when they could say their migraine is on break. But people who suffer cluster headaches, it's a little bit different. So I guess it got its name because the headaches tend to cluster together around a period of time, and then they have what looks like a break in between when the headaches disappear completely, and this break could be up to a year or even longer. And then it comes back again and afflicts them for, weeks to months, and then disappears. But during that period when the headaches are on, so I would just describe them for the sake of this video as on and off period. For this period when the headaches are on, which can run into weeks to months, they can get their headaches multiple times a day. It can be as frequent as 8 times a day, and as infrequent as once every 2 days. And it continues this way, and it even wakes them up in the middle of the night, and they have terrible headaches when these attacks are going on. In fact, some headache experts say that cluster headache is the most painful condition known to man. It's really, really painful. If some of you are watching the video have cluster headache, I believe you can actually corroborate what I'm saying about how painful it is. So this individual had been on a break for some time, or off period, and then the new cluster began about a week before they came to see me. And while I was interacting with them, trying to take history to confirm that truly what they have is cluster headache, and then to see how best to cook up a treatment for them, I realized that they had never had a head MRI scan. And I was taken aback because, you know, every single individual who's got a diagnosis of cluster headache must have a head MRI scan. It's not negotiable. So the essence of this video today is to drive home this point that if your doctor says you've got cluster headache, then you must have a head MRI scan, you know, at diagnosis. And if you're watching this video and you have cluster headache, or someone has told you it's cluster headache, and you've not had a head MRI scan, you need to start thinking about having one. Why is it so? For me, it's non-negotiable. It's one of the absolute indications for head MRI scan. The reason is clear. Now, we think, when I say we, I'm talking about the expert community, the neurology community, or headache specialist community, that cluster headache is an innocent headache, even though it's really painful, it's really disabling. It's an innocent headache, and if you followed my videos in the past, you'll understand that that's a primary headache disorder. So it's a kind of headache where there's nothing else wrong with the brain other than the fact that it's generating this headache, so it's not dangerous. But we also know that a significant proportion of people who present with what looks like cluster headache actually turn out having something else going on in their brains or within their skull compartment, which is masquerading as cluster headache or mimicking cluster headaches. So because of this mimics, which is more likely with cluster headache than with migraine, for instance, or other headache conditions, we recommend, and highly so, that everyone with a cluster headache must have a head MRI scan. Now, we were at a headache meeting probably 2 years ago, and this was a meeting, a scientific meeting dedicated to headaches, and there was this man who has been a neurologist for, I think, over 20 years, who came and shared an experience of somebody he had been following and treating for cluster headache, and for many, many years. And it turned out when they went for an MRI scan that they had a tumor somewhere beneath their brain, what we call the pituitary area. And this tumor was so huge, and they had to go for urgent removal of the tumor. And after that, the headaches disappeared. So that's just a case, a real life case, to illustrate the point that if you've got cluster headache, you must have a head MRI scan. Right, thank you for following the video till this stage. I do appreciate it. If you did watch till the end, I'd like you to like, share, leave your comment behind. Thank you so much for following all the time, and what shall I say, thank you again, and hopefully I'll see you again in my next video. Bye for now.